very quickly because his mind works so fast. Talking about a mind working so fast, here is David Curtin. How are you, David?
Hi, Sonia. I'm good. I'm good. Thanks on this Monday morning. Good to see you both.
Good to see you too. We appreciate you joining us, David. David, of course, is from the Heritage Party. And well, I mean, it's going to be an interesting conversation because, I mean, where do we start? Let's start about Qatar, first of all. We're going to be talking about the whole LGBT agenda and about the issues that have arisen over the last few weeks. Obviously, David, Qatar not having any of it, right?
Yeah, that's right. But I think this should be about football. I mean, people want to watch this around the world because they're interested in footballing skills and glory and everything that we always had before. We never had all of this politics in football before. This really has been very, very recent. I know that wokery has been infesting our culture, in general for 20 years or so, but it's only really in the last 3 years or so that it's gone into football. And suddenly it's totally changed and it's made it almost unwatchable. I haven't watched it at all this year because all that everyone is talking about is, are they going to take the knee for Black Lives Matter? Are they going to wear a rainbow armband? And those are the stories. I'm more interested in hearing about, people scoring great goals and so on, but that doesn't seem to be the focus of it anymore.
What do you think?
Everything is politicized, isn't it?
Exactly. What I'm interested in what you both think about us going over to other people's countries and trying to impose our will on how other people conduct themselves.
This is neo-colonialism, isn't it? And the irony is that all of these people who are woke cultural Marxists, they all try to make out, oh, we're terrible and we're institutionally racist because of slavery 200 years ago, which nobody today has got any fault in, bearing any responsibility for. But then they're going over and imposing these new sort of oppressor victim narratives on other countries and saying, you have to change, especially and particularly the whole LGBT thing, having a go at anybody who doesn't have the same, what they call progressive laws as we do. They want to introduce same-sex marriage and then gender identity, then ban conversion therapy. And then, they're even talking about, banning certain speech and people getting arrested, for saying that there's two sexes, male and female. That happens in this country, in the USA. And you know what? I think a lot of countries that like Qatar, Russia, China, they don't have great human rights records, of course. I'm not saying they don't, but they're looking at the West and thinking, we don't want any of that because that is just insane. And, I think good for them.
Yeah, same. It's just the perversion of family for me that's just taking it too far. I don't mind anyone's preferences and how they want to live. I just don't think it should be involved in absolutely everything, whether that be walking into Marks and Spencer's, turning on the football, flipping, buying a can of Coke. It is literally absolutely everywhere.
I mean, that's the important thing. We discussed this last week, and both Sean and I were coming from this place that it's not homophobic to recognize that the LGBTQ alphabet is an agenda. In fact, it has very little to do with being gay, lesbian or bi. We're now discovering that all the letters after that are really a lot of straight people who want their kinks to be aired in public. And so FA Wales, for example, they tweeted, we're frustrated, we're disappointed, but we remain with the belief that football is for everyone and stand with our LGBTQ members of the Welsh football family. I would argue not a jot has been changed by these stunts over the week. Joe Lycett shredding pretend money, Harry Kane wearing his rainbow watch. I mean, honestly, what are your thoughts about these people? And the thing is, if they truly cared, they would be prepared to be disciplined by FIFA, but they don't. That's when you can really tell, right, David?
Yeah, absolutely. And also another thing they could do if they really cared and they really, really were concerned about Qatar's human rights records and being homophobic and transphobic, because they say they just wouldn't go to Qatar.
Right.
But there's a lot of money in it. The footballers get paid a lot of money for going out to be there, plus all of the sponsorships that come on the back of it. So, they like the money, but they're not really willing to say, I'm not going to go there because I'm really going to take a stand. They're not doing that. And, going back to Wales, as you say, I mean, stand with the LGBTQ community. This sort of alphabet soup of letters, again, is a really new construct. And, I totally agree with the Wolfenden report of 1957 and so on, that, if you're a homosexual, you shouldn't be put in prison. you
God,
know, or,
no.
you know, people they shouldn't be bullied for what they do, you know, in the privacy of their own home as adults. Okay, get on with it. But from the moment they started bringing in same-sex marriage, trying to redefine marriage, and then going in and teaching children, oh, there's all different shapes and sizes of families and so on, and then introducing, you know, the right to surrogacy of like designer babies that are then going to be placed with same-sex couples, and then denying a baby, deliberately denying a child their own mother and father, you know, by you know, deliberately. I think that's wrong. And you know, I don't stand with that, and I don't think many footballers would stand with that, or many of the fans would stand with that. But nobody's not included, because if you're gay or lesbian, you can go to a football match, no problem. Nobody's saying that nobody's included, but it is, like you say, the pushing of a political agenda to get things changed in society for, you know, whoever is pushing the agenda.
Yeah, well, I wonder if there's any studies done yet on the gender identity of children brought up in same-sex marriages, and if it kind of is something that is, you know,
well, it's highly likely, because there's a lot of very virtue signaling type of parents online who, like, there's this one woman in particular who's married to a man. She now calls herself a lesbian because she says her husband is a woman, and so and her children are transgender. And you have to wonder, because I think when you have that sort of attitude in a household, children are going to be confused, aren't they?
Yeah.
If you're telling them they can be born in the wrong body.
Yeah, and then that leads into kind of what the is it the Proud Trust?
Yeah, the Proud Trust.
Because this is what are people doing to kind of discover, is this a mental health issue? Is this really someone who wants to transition, or is this someone, say, who's got autism and that's just bloody confused because they're getting bombarded with all this like different knowledge? Like there's nothing actually in place to kind of like, it's just, okay, you are that, let's go.
We've been failing children.
Yeah, there's a lot of research being done on this subject. I know one of the main researchers is Professor Zucker from Canada, and you know, he's discovered that 98% of people who display gender dysphoria as children will naturally desist from it, you know, if there's no kind of affirmation. The problem is now that politically, people are required to affirm their acquired gender identity as young as like 3 or 4 years old. And then when that happens, the normal process of, you know, some people go through this, they experiment, they just grow up, it's very confusing, and then they desist and just, you know, act normally. When that's stopped, when they're affirmed, then the normal desistance doesn't take place and they stay on the course, particularly if they go to one of these gender identity clinics and they get started on puberty blockers, which I think is absolutely wicked. But you know, there's a lot of money in this, to be honest. The drug
huge amount.
They make a lot of money.
These are customers for life. You know, because you have to keep suppressing who you are in order to be able to be who you are, apparently. But there's a development there. Susie Green has left. Susie Green infamously runs the charity Mermaids, of course, took a 16-year-old son out of the country for an operation that wasn't permitted in the UK and came back with a daughter. She's now left the charity Mermaids, and they are being investigated by the Charity Commission. So there's lots of things happening in that regard, but it's too late for a lot of people. Some people have already had their bodies mutilated.
That's exactly the word, and we need to call it what it is. It is child mutilation, and it is absolutely wicked that it's going on. You know, people are sort of, you know, moving back from it a bit now, but we kind of gone through 10 years of hell, and the children that have been like victims of that, you know, they talk about detransitioning, but you can't really detransition if you've had bits of your body chopped off. You know, they're going to be sterile for the rest of their lives at the very least. You know,
this is what ties into what's going on across the whole planet. I think everything that's happening right now is to stop 2 generations from having children.
Wow.
I think that ties into the vaccine. I think it ties into the transgender pushing and the puberty blockers. They're just literally sterilizing 2 generations.
And also abortion as well, mass abortion.
And abortion, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these things. And I have to say that I do believe in the right to choose. I do, about abortion. But David, all of this ties into what's going on in Russia, which I think is really interesting, because so obviously Putin, he's let let out on a number of occasions that he thinks the West are just ridiculous about this whole thing. He laughs at us regarding transgenderism and etc. So what's going on in Russia now then?
Yeah, well, they've just passed a law, and they've said that it's going to be illegal. It's going to be a criminal offence to propagandize LGBT. Either attack the idea of the traditional family, or to promote this gender ideology where you can change your genders to children, but also in society as a whole. I think my personal view is that that's wise, because if you're going to protect children, you've got to stop it in the main society. You can't just have it on television, at 10 o'clock at night, because children can now record it, whatever. It goes all over, social media. So I think that's very, very good. And they want to return to traditional values. And I think that the whole of the population is on board with that. When they took the vote in the Duma, it was 420 something, however many MPs they've got there, to 0. There was no dissent whatsoever. Everyone with one accord was like, we need to get rid of this because it's toxic and it's poison to Russian society, which it is to British society and American society as well. Unfortunately, we've got MPs who are in positions of power who are allowing these things to go on and actively promoting it. I mean, I think that, I want to get into Parliament and sweep them away, because they really are doing our country, a great disservice. And I'm being very polite about it there. But, I think good for Russia, because that's all the children there are now going to be protected. They're not going to be mutilated. They're not going to be growing up in families that are disruptive, as much as possible. They're going to try to promote the traditional family and mothers and fathers. They have the children, they stay together, they bring up their children, they pass on their values, their patriotic values.
These have all become dirty words, though. Everything you're saying have all become dirty words, right? Like traditional values, people are like, oh no, we can't have that.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because what's good has become bad, and what's bad's become good. There's been an absolute inversion of principles over the last 50 years, and particularly that's accelerated in the last 10 years. There's been a couple of waves. The 60s was a first wave of sort of liberalism, and now we've had another wave in the 2010s going into the 2020s, where they're just completely pushing the agenda. I think they want to finish this agenda and just totally transform society into something which is inverted and which is absolutely horrible and demonic and disgusting, and that's what's happening. They're very open about it. They've got Agenda 2030, they've got the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the gender ideology is part of that, and
if you're confused about your body, then you're more likely to give up your body for whatever, in terms of. But what I also found out as well, and this is what I would love people in that movement to kind of grasp. So pride is actually considered the original and worst of the 7 deadly sins. And it is actually considered the most demonic, which is crazy. And it is also considered the complete opposite of God, anti-God. Yeah. And the Tower of Babel was painted as an example of pride.
And the pride movement is international, absolutely huge. So we see adults in furry leather costumes with children, close them and everything. And honestly, I don't know where you stand on this, David, but I do know we come together. But I'm absolutely, I'm all for equality. I truly am. But when people go trans rights are human rights and everything, what they're actually failing to tell you is, first of all, every transgender person has the same rights as all of us on this screen. And what they're failing to tell you is, when they say trans rights are human rights, they're talking about mark this person out as special and allow them to do what everybody else in society can't do. And that's just ridiculous. It's about creating these real dystopian kind of corners where people aren't part of society.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. I believe in equal rights, human rights, equality before the law. The thing is that what if you call yourself a trans person or a gay person or a lesbian person, whatever, you have equal rights in Western society. What they're talking about is special rights that go above and beyond equal rights, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. That then it's based on the narrative that society is inherently and systemically unjust in some way. because we
Right.
won't allow trans people to walk around the streets with a sex toy on them in front of children and twerk in front of them,
Right.
and that's somehow oppressive. No, it's not. We need to protect our children. That is not a human right to do that. That is actually something
Excellent
that's
point.
criminal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. That's what
Excellent
Russia
point.
is doing, and good
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah, and one of my friends who's homosexual, he said that he's now pushed out of the whole movement because he won't get with a trans man because he is a woman, so
absolutely.
It just doesn't do it for him, and he's like completely banished now.
And they don't like the word homosexual, by the way, because it's about a sex, and they don't want to talk about it. They want to talk about just genders, which is all kind of made up in the head, obviously. David, I admire you very much for being a politician who's prepared to walk the talk. I know it's not easy. It cannot be easy because politicians are so lily-livered and spineless. And so I always admire you for being prepared to speak out, whether we agree or not. I absolutely do admire that in you. I really do. So thank you for being prepared to do that. Truly, everybody. David Curtin of the Heritage Party.
Thank you, Sonia. Good to be with you.
Good to see you too. Have a good week. Take care.
You too. Bye.
It takes some bottle to do that, sure.